Are we live? 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 Did you put the Renyard clip in?
Yeah.
Yeah? Are we live?
Yeah, we're live.
We are live. Right, everybody.
Hang on. Let's just make sure we are live.
We're just going to make sure we are live. I'm waiting on your call, Bridger. Tell me when. Tell me when.
We're live.
We're live. Yeah?
Yeah, we are live, mate.
Sweet. Do you want to turn the volume down?
Yeah, volume down.
Okay, so underwater live stream. 2 guesses what this is going to be about. It's going to be about the underwater filming that we are doing and the underwater films that we have just done. I'm sure lots of you will know. If you don't know, I'll be very surprised because we've done our very best to make everybody aware of the fact, but we've just done 2 underwater films. 1 session, which turned into 2 films, and what a result that all was. So before I go into this, there are 3 prizes up for grabs, and if you would like to win one of these, which I'm sure lots of you do, you need to be a Cypography member. That's the first catch. If you're not a member, you cannot win. And in order to win, whether you're watching this live, so in the live stream comment section right now, or in the next hour or so, in that comment section, just tell us what you thought of the films, what you liked about them, what you didn't like about them maybe, just, you know, your comments, your thoughts on those films. If you're watching this at a later date, not live, then you can still add your comments into the comment section. The important thing is you leave a comment, but that you are a member of Cypography as well. Bridger, do you want to eat your sweet quickly? Go on, just open it. Go on, open. Just go on. Sorry, Bridger says having a sweet. Right. Just be a member. That's the important thing, and leave a comment. Now, whether you watch this live or whether you watch it at a later date, like I say, it doesn't matter. But we really want to get people watching these at the time. You know, we're doing live streams for a reason, and the main reason for that is we want people to get involved. We want live feedback. We want to talk to you, and we want to do something a little bit different. No one really does these in fishing that much. Certainly not on YouTube that we've noticed anyway. So we're trying to do something a little bit different, but the interaction side of it is important, because what's the point in a live stream if you're just sat here on your own with no one to talk to? So the 3 prizes, before I leave the prize subject behind, are there's a quarter bundle, which is all the bits and pieces I use during these films. So it's the lead, the rig, all the bits and pieces. You need to construct that. So what you see me using in those films, you will be able to construct and use for yourself. That's the quarter prize. The Baitworks bundle is the bait that I used. I'm sure you could guess that. Boilies, pellets, liquids, all sorts there. And again, we'll look at these in a little bit more detail as we go into this. And then the 3rd prize, and probably the best prize, is 48 hours fishing at Ashbury Fisheries. Now, there are 2 lakes on site at Ashbury Fisheries, and it will be on one of those that you get to fish. So 3 pretty cool prizes, we think, for our members. And we will do the draw for this in about end of next week. So I'm going to France next week, so be just after that. So you've got around about a week or so. What's the date now? 26th of July. So yeah, what day is it today, Bridger? Tuesday.
Tuesday, mate.
So not next Monday, the Monday after, whatever date that is, but you'll have a little while to get your comments in, and we will then pick 3 members who will win the 3 prizes. And like I said at the start, you have to be a Cypography member to win. So that's the prizes out of the way. And before we go into the nitty gritty of this live stream, we're going to play you the trailer. This is the double trailer for both films. So this will give you, if you haven't seen these films, this will give you a really good idea of what happened and what you can expect should you decide to watch them at some point. I don't really know what to say, to be quite honest. I've told you how happy I am already. I've told you how blown away I am. I've told you how crazy it's been, watching all the footage, watching everything unfold, making the little changes. This is carp fishing like I've never known it before. Oh my God, I've got him. Oh.
Yeah! Just under 45. Just under 45.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It looked big out in the middle, and I just seen it, and I don't think it looked as big. I don't know. My head is blown. Back, it's coming back, it's coming back, it's coming back. Oh, look, I just won it. Mate, put the goo in, mate. This is what they've done on the underwater, mate. I put it in the water and they just want it. That is the first carp that's come onto the spot, and he's 3 times in a row he's gone up to that hook bait. 3 times in a row. Watching him sat on that spot, I've never seen a carp do anything like that. He just sat there hugging the bottom. Mental, mental, mental stuff. Like, does it get any more scary than this? Just look at him just eating. This is a massive comment. Guarding the spot of his life. If your hook bait doesn't stand out, you have to have a feeding situation where they're feeding confidently, and that isn't happening here. They're dropping down and then they're moving off. So I'm now gonna put Ye Old Faithful out there. Squid goo pop up. Got so many carp on these. Yes, he's very good. Literally there. Oh, inches.
The one behind it.
Yeah. Seen him out there on the top. I'm glad I ain't got my Polaroids on. I actually hate watching him out there. I can see him though, out in the lake. And this capture will live on as by far one of my favourites. By far one of the most memorable, and something that I'm going to be smiling about for a very, very long time. Thank you so much. See you later, old friend. So there we go. Right, when we first got our camera, it sounds a bit cliche, but if you were to tell us that is what would happen when we did our first film, you know, we would really never have believed it. And it will take some beating. You know, it resulted in the biggest carp ever caught in front of an underwater camera, a really big carp regardless of that fact. And for those that have watched the film, and I can see in the comment section now, you know, people are mentioning some of the behaviour of the carp. It was incredible what happened, what we saw, you know, what we went through to get to that stage. And watching the films now, you know, that there was so much that happened before that. And we got the camera, we first got the camera, it was probably 18 months ago, something like that, maybe more. It got lost in transit, so I think it was stuck in customs for about 4 months, something silly like that. Throughout lockdown, you know, things were a nightmare, and what we always knew was going to be a difficult task became ever so difficult from the start. Firstly, by losing our camera, and at one stage we thought it was gone and we wouldn't have to get another one made. So to get to that stage and to now have these films, you know, at one point we were like, is this ever actually going to happen? Yeah, and Bridget just said, you know, he's forgot about that. I haven't forgot about that because it haunted me for a very long time. And it was pretty stressful, you know. We thought, you know, we finally got this camera coming, and then it disappeared. But eventually we got it back, and I've got a pond in the garden. So the logical thing to do before we did anything at a lake was to try it out in the pond. You know, it's the perfect testing facility. I don't test rigs and things like that in there, but an underwater camera, it was absolutely perfect for it. And we filmed like the first time we ever put it in the pond, and it's a little bit of footage that I will look back on very fondly in years to come, I'm sure. I look back fondly at it now, but I think as time moves on, you know, that moment, having that on film, both under the water and out the water, you know, something I will cherish. And you'll probably better tell from the clip just how excited we were to finally have this camera, not just in our hands, but in the water and functioning. This is a big day.
Big day.
A fucking big day. This is a big day. Right.
So hope it's waterproof. Are you excited about this?
I use the Fox camo, the leadless stuff, doing this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it hides it quite well, doesn't it?
Yeah, blends in. See, look.
Yeah, it blends in perfectly.
Nothing.
Oh, sick! Oh, yes! Yes! Look at him! Look at this! I love the camera!
This is a big day. Yes, mate. Yes. Buzzing. Look at him.
I love it. Why?
Yeah.
There's one over there.
Mega. No, they were down there. Fucking buzzing. Welcome to the next generation.
Just bait it.
So the underwater camera is in. What are you saying, mate?
This is my new job, just to make sure the fish
Yeah,
are
this
right
is his
all
new
the time.
job. Can't see any fish at the moment. We've been waiting a long time for this.
Here we go, look. Stage 1 of our underwater project. Get the camera in the pond and go from there. Look at that.
Right, first thing you'll notice about the pond is it's very, very clear. And we knew that was always going to be quite an important part of an underwater film. You know, if you don't have the clarity on your side, you're pretty much, you know, you ain't going to be able to do it. It's that simple. So in the pond, crystal clear, and we thought, right, as long as we've got good water clarity, we'll be fine. The first film we planned to do was with Alan Blair, and we got the wheels in motion, we found a spot, we started baiting it, everything looked good. Everything looked really good, in fact. Alan was buzzing, we were buzzing, you know, it felt like on the verge of getting something in the bag. And we've got a lot of this documented, in fact we've got it all documented, really, up until the point when there was an algae bloom. Now, in the spring, that's kind of common. Once you get the light, once the light levels increase, the water, at the time the water was crystal clear. It was perfect. You know, it couldn't really have been any better for what we wanted to do. But was it? How long before was it, Bridger, that it went? The week before?
Oh yeah.
Days.
Really close. Yeah, yeah.
It was days before we were going to film. The water clarity went, and we went down there to check, and because it was so clear to start with, we looked in the water and we had that kind of sinking feeling that things may have changed. I think there'd been a bit of rain, and in fact there had been a bit of rain. I was on a stag do that weekend. I remember it. Very windy, very rainy, and we thought maybe the lake's been stirred up a bit. Turned out that wasn't the case, and what had actually happened was an algal bloom. So although we'd had all that windy weather, the couple of days after that, it was really sunny, the water had bloomed, and we were starting to lose the clarity. And at first it wasn't too bad, but you know, we were checking it every day, and then the water clarity went. Basically, we put the camera in, and it got to the point we were like, this isn't clear enough. So at that stage we didn't really know what to do. Alan's a very busy man, and we're thinking he's not going to be able to do it, so who can we do it with? We wanted to do the first one a little bit closer to home, you know, because it's quite an ordeal to get it done. It's a whole new element of filming that we've never done before. You know, at Cypography, we have made a lot of carp fishing videos. We have not made very many underwater carp fishing videos. So it was gutting, to be honest. That, you know, that when we realised it wasn't happening, that was, I think we went to France, didn't we, Bridger? I think we ended up, I'm pretty sure, yeah, the week we had booked to go and do the underwater film with Alan. Because that didn't happen, we went to drown our sorrows in France. Had a great trip. But as soon as we got back, and whilst you're away, you know, we're thinking, where can we do this? Where can we do this? And there's a lake not too far, well, just over the road from where we were going to do the one with Alan. And we thought, we could do it there. I've fished this place, I fished it first in 2007. It was a syndicate back then. It's slightly different now, how it's all run. But I knew the fishing on there suited edge fishing. It's a deep lake. The margins are relatively deep, but in places quite shallow. And because of the depth, in that spring period, the carp really do push up the shelf. And I've got a lot of good memories from years gone by of fishing that lake in the springtime, summer, and seeing these fish, you know, right up the shelf in the edge. Now, water clarity was going to be the first question we needed to ask. So I rung Ash. The lake is run differently now. Back in the day, like I say, it was a syndicate. Nowadays, Ashbury Fisheries, as it is called, is run. It's quite strange how it's run, actually, different to how a lot of lakes do it, but it's part syndicate and it's part exclusive bookings. So from what I can make out, the two lakes, because there are two lakes on site, you've got the top lake and you've got the Mere, they are split 50-50 between booking and syndicate. And if you have a syndicate ticket, I think you're told in advance which weeks of the year are booked out for the exclusives. If they don't get booked, you can fish. And I think it's about 350 quid for the membership, which covers both. So for a syndicate, with the stock that these lakes have, because they do have an impressive stock of carp, 350 quid is a bargain as far as I'm concerned. But you do have to contend with the fact that you've got the bookings here and there. So I spoke to Ash and asked him if we could do one there, and he was like, yeah, go and look at the water clarity as well, because it's never been so good. And I've been to both these lakes a lot over the years. They're not far from my house, and like I say, I've fished them in the past. But when we went there to look, the water clarity was incredible, and we could see down, I would say you could see the bottom easily from the boat in 10 foot. It was tap clear. Now, that's one thing you have to deal with, the water clarity, because like I said, without the water clarity you can't see very well. The second thing you have to worry about is what actually happens when the fish start feeding. And the Mere is a clay bottom lake. So the problem you have with that, and the problem we were potentially going to be faced with, was when the carp start feeding, what happens to the water? Because any of you that have ever stepped foot in a clay bottom lake will know, or even fished a clay bottom lake, a lot of the time they're not clear. The more fish they have in them, if you've got a heavily stocked clay bottom lake, it will be chocolate brown all year because the fish just stir it up. This lake wasn't too heavily stocked, I think around 100, 120 carps, about 12 acres, so that side of things isn't too much of an issue, and at this period of time it was crystal clear, but we had the issue of carp feeding and murking it up. So that was something we really had to contend with, but we kind of felt like we've probably got a lake now that we can do this, or at least try, and that was, you know, all we wanted to do. We just wanted to try it. Were we expecting it to go well the first time? In the early stages, probably not. We didn't really know, but once we went over and had a good look at the lake, it then became quite clear that just how good an opportunity this could be. And one thing Ash did say was he doesn't know how long the water clarity will hold out, and we'd already learned how quickly it can switch. And he said in years gone by it's normally clear in the spring, but it does drop out. So we wanted to do it as soon as we could, and we looked at all the availability, and we're quite lucky really that there were a few small slots where we could have a go. So I think the first time we actually went there for a look, and then after that we just kind of said, right, we're going to do it. And then we went down, we put the camera in, and there is a video on YouTube which you can watch, which shows the first sort of 5 days, I think it was 5 or 6 days, that period basically, the build up from deciding we were going to do it there, baiting it, and you know, building up towards the point we were going to fish. So that video is there for you all to watch. It's about 15 minutes long, and it's a big section from one of the films. So if you're interested in sort of what happened in the build up, then by all means watch it. I mentioned a little while ago that we're giving away a Baitworks bundle, and this next clip will give you a little insight into the bait that I used, and there will also be some particles as well. So you'll have a Baitworks/Nash particle bundle, basically all the bits and pieces I used and fed with during the trip. Yeah, I've skipped them. For the first bait up, I wanted to introduce a mixture of different baits, and first into the bucket was a mixture of large particles, things like maples and maize. Next I wanted to add some pellet, and the pellet I was adding is very, very small, 2 or 3 mil. It's called Edge Pellet from Baitworks, and it's something I've used over the last 6 months to a year or so, so I've got confidence in that. Once that's into the bucket, give it a little mix up just to get the ratios right. I'm working on about 60-70% particle to 30-40% pellet. And then time to add some boilies. Now, I always fish with a mixture of different boilies, and first into the bucket was Royal Marine in 18 mil. But rather than just add whole boilies, I wanted to break some up. So using my fingers and thumbs, just break the boilies in half. It gives you a variation of different sizes. You get the little bits of crumb break off, that kind of thing. Then add some whole boilies once I've done that, and then add the second boilie, which is the Atlantic Heat, and once again, break the boilies in half. They're a little bit frozen, so I had to use my mouth at times to actually get them halved. Get them into the bucket, and then once again, add a few holes to the mix as well. Give the whole lot a good mix up, and then add some liquid fish. Now, it absolutely stinks. It's dark in colour, and I've used it a lot over the last few years. Loads of confidence in that. A really smelly liquid that's going to seep into the bottom and up into the water column. You know, loads of attraction packed in that. Give it a good mix around, and then last but not least, add some hemp. I love using hemp. I use it all the time. It's so oily. Carp love it. You know, it's just an all-time great, and no mix is complete without that as far as I'm concerned. So hemp into the bucket, give the whole lot a good mix up, and we're ready to go. Okay, right. So that's what you can win. That's what we fed the spot with to start with. But before I talk about that, there was a little section of pictures that I had forgot to mention, and I think Bridget would really want me to show them because of my haircut that you will see at the time. So
Possibly the worst hair.
this is from when I fished the lake many years ago, and the original stock of carp in there was pretty incredible, really. That you find lakes every now and then where the fish have suffered with fin rot. All their fins are melted down, and this is like classic stamp of fish from the lake. Lovely old commons, and then probably the most famous carp that ever lived in there was a fish called Hendrix, which I'm sure lots of you will know. So yeah, this is a little montage of me with a really cool hat, some pretty dreadful hair, and a variety of interesting carp. Yeah, so they're the carp. By the time we came to fish it, like I say, that was 10 years or more ago. By the time we came to fish it, there was one 40-pounder in the lake and around about 20 30s. And at the time I fished it originally, there were more big carp than that. It's kind of gone. The lake's gone full circle to a degree. Like, you know, a lot of the fish that were small when I fished it are now the big ones, and the big ones that used to be in there when I first fished it have dropped away. So fish are always coming through as they do. Like the top lake next door, back in those times there were hardly any big carp in there. Now that's actually got more big carp than the mere has. So, you know, the complex is doing really well. Some of the fish that I fished for back in the day obviously are still alive. They're all much bigger. Some of them are dead. That's just kind of how it goes. But when we arrived at the lake, you know, we had a good stock of carp to go at, but one real big carp who, believe it or not, we did bump into later on in the trip. So the bait sequence I've showed you. Now, feeding the spot was going to be really important. You know, we had to get fish feeding on the spot, because without that initial build-up, without them building their confidence in front of the camera, we're always very much of the opinion that when you put that camera down onto a spot, you know, they're not going to be too happy about it. And we learnt that quite quickly when we looked at the fish in the pond. So when I put the camera into the pond the first time around, the fish could not leave it alone. They were swimming up to it constantly. They were very, very intrigued. And in a lake where they're fished for, they're aware of human presence, they're aware of anything alien, and a lot of the time they're on edge because of the fact that they're aware of they're going to be fished for. We thought, we need this camera in the water, we need to bait it, build the confidence of the fish up before we fish. And we only had around about 5 days or so to do that. But that initial mix that you've just seen was what we went in with. I put a lot of bait on the spot. I wanted to be able to bait it once, leave it, and just come back and keep checking at it. And I think probably put about 10 kilos in, which is a lot of bait. Not loads of boilies, you know, it wasn't a really expensive mix. There was a lot of small bits and pieces in there, cheaper items as well. But, you know, a good mix of stuff, both big and small food items. The small stuff was going to really help clean the spot. And eventually, you know, we got to the stage where we could fish. And the first day, we saw fish. You know, when we turned up to put the riggings, it was only going to be one rig. We saw carp on the spot that day, and immediately we were thinking, right, the pre-baiting's done its work. We had we'd seen them in the build-up as well, so we're turning up thinking we'll put the rig in position, the fish will come onto the spot, and we'll start catching them, which really didn't turn out to be the case. You know, it was much more difficult than that. But the first rig that I put out, I think, is quite an interesting point. So if I just show you the rig that I went in with, because I think these underwater films, something that really does interest people is that technical side of it. And it was certainly really interesting for us to watch. So this is what I started with, and we'll have a little look at that and then talk about why and what I changed to as the trip moved on. On goes the hook bait, and in this instance I'm using a 15mm white wafter. It's been glugged in all sorts of bits and pieces, so it's a slightly duller colour than bright white, and I actually like that fact that when it's over a gravel spot, which it often is in the edge, it doesn't stand out too much, but it is still quite visible. This is mounted onto the hair, and I use dental floss so that I can adjust the length of my rigs. As I said a second ago, I use the same rig all the time, so I adjust the length of the hair. That suits the bait, whether it's a small bait or a big bait. The floss enables me to switch between the two. And I'll have a little bit of yellow foam on the hook bait as well. I always do this when I'm fishing on the deck. I don't really use snowman rigs. I don't really use big bright hook baits in the edge, but I always have just that tiny little fleck of colour on top of the hook bait, just to grab a little bit of attention. And in this case, it's probably going to help us see it on the camera, which is an added bonus. The cameras are rigged up and ready. The rig is ready to go in. Hook point checked, everything checked one final time, and a fresh coat of camera coat which stops the corrosion once in the water. And that's something I find really important with sharpened hooks. So we're pretty much ready to go. All the checks are done. Last thing to do is have a little look in the snag and just see if there's any fish present in the bottom of the bait. Right, so that rig, it's the rig I use all the time. So on the technical side of it, you know, that is what you will see me use in pretty much every situation. The hook bait changes quite a lot, depending on where I'm fishing, what I'm doing, and what I'm trying to achieve with that hook bait. Now, I do a lot of edge fishing. When I fish in the edges, I don't use a lot of bait. I may bait with a lot of bait in advance of my trips. When it actually comes to the fishing, I don't use a great deal. The reason for that, I find it a little unnecessary. You know, those margin spots, I always imagine fish to drift in onto them. They're certainly not places they want to sit and spend loads of time when they don't have cover over their heads. You know, if they have a snag, whatever, you know, they're really happy, they're really safe there. But quite a lot of the time in the edge, you find yourself fishing places, you know, where carp are often spooked by anglers. People walking around, you know, the closer they are to the bank, the closer they are to angling pressure, and overfeeding in the edge can cause you problems, basically. And I've always found that really you don't need to use that much bait. If you've got them coming in onto a spot, once they're there, you want to get that bite as quick as possible. And out in the lake, you know, you can put loads of food out, and that can really work. And I fish over big quantities of bait out in the lake quite a lot of the time. But for me, edge fishing is always a little bit more refined, it's a bit more delicate. And, you know, I'd put a 10 kilo hit of bait in, granted, but when it came to the fishing, I wanted to fish with a small amount of bait, a hook bait that didn't stand out too much because of the bird life. And when you've got birds, which all lakes have, unless someone is controlling them, you know, they can cause you problems. And if you put a bright hook bait on a spot, it's very easy for birds to see and then pick that bait up. Now, the spot that we had, it'd been baited, it was all ready to go, the bait had been cleared, and to start with, I'm thinking, right, I'm gonna put a handful of bait out, a hook bait that doesn't stand out too much, as you saw in that clip, a little bit of yellow foam, which is actually banned at Ashbury Fisheries. So when Ash came down to watch the cameras with us, he was like, is that foam? And I was like, yeah, why? He said it's banned. So if you do go there, don't use yellow foam, because you're not allowed. But he let me leave it on there for the sake of the film for, you know, a short period of time, which it ended up being. But the little bit of yellow foam is there just to, you know, it's not enough for a bird to see it from miles away and immediately home in on it. But, you know, if you're a carp and you're down feeding on the spot, that little fleck of colour, it's just something I've pretty much always used with my bottom baits. That was a wafter, but, you know, when I'm fishing on the deck, a little bit of yellow foam, whether it's a tiger nut, whatever, something small enough just to aid the carp in finding it. Now, we thought the carp were going to turn up and eat happily. They'd cleared all the bait, and, you know, because of that, we didn't expect getting a bite to be as difficult as it was. But what we quite quickly learned, and I think the clip I'm about to show you, we didn't realise it at this point. This is one of the real early visits we had from the carp, but the fish weren't going to be as confident feeding on this spot as we first thought. And this next clip will highlight that.
Pizzas.
Right. Fish just came in, all agitated, he was right up for it. I think he might be in the back of the shot now. You could tell he was up for it. Dropped straight down centre of the spot, had a mouthful. I don't think that was a bad fish either.
I was too busy cooking pizza.
Yeah, we was just about to have some lunch. Aeroplanes are out in force today. I don't like aeroplanes. Mate, that was epic. He looked.
He didn't hang about, did he?
No,
Come
he
straight
just
in?
came down, wallop, went off. He'll be back though. He's had a he knew there was food there. He knew there was food there, like, and that's why you pre-bait, because they know there's food there. No doubt. Here we go. He's coming back. 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 Come on, God. Oh, look at me. He's not a bad fish, mate. I reckon he wants to turn and come back at it. Come
That's
on.
as exciting as it gets, isn't it?
Come back.
Now?
Oh, what time is it? Got so much data to log. Me and Bridget were just discussing how many vapes we went through on that shoot. It was a lot. Right, so you'll see there in that clip, the fish comes down, first time it visits the spot, it drops, it has a mouthful, it swims off, it then comes back, almost drops down and doesn't. Now, the first time we saw this, you know, we didn't quite realise how much of a common theme that was going to be. So, cut a long story short, and if you watch the films or have watched the films, you will know this, or you will find out when you watch them, you know. You'll see it with your own eyes. But the fish were not confident in feeding on that spot, and it became really difficult to get them to hold. So they would come over to the spot, they would drop down, they would have a mouthful, and they would swim off. And that happened time and time again. They didn't want to sit on the spot and eat or graze, would probably be a good way of putting it. Now, at the back of the spot, further away from the camera, nearer the weed, a little bit deeper down the shelf, you know, they would feed happily. But we needed to get these fish eating in front of the camera. And the first day, things, well, I don't want to spoil it too much, you know, for people that haven't seen the film, but after around about a day and a half, we'd kind of got to, I'd got to the point where, although we'd had fish visiting the spot, it was starting to dawn on me that they just didn't want to eat close enough to the camera, or at least that when they did eat near the camera, because my hook bait didn't stand out, it was the chances of getting the pickup were quite slim. Now, I said at the start I wanted to fish over a small amount of bait, and I did to begin with, but on the first night I baited up because that's what I'd been doing in the build up to the trip. So I put a couple of spoons of bait out, which isn't a lot, you know, my bait spoon's only that big probably. A couple of spoons of bait, and you know, it didn't seem like a lot of bait, and I was hoping that it would get eaten overnight. But when we turned the camera on the second morning, it hadn't been eaten. And straight away, I'm like, oh no. Because what had happened the first day, the wind had turned, the fish had left the bay, and they were nowhere to be seen really. We didn't really see a lot. Following morning, like I say, there's bait on the spot that I didn't want on the spot. I was hoping that bait was going to be eaten overnight. So now I'm faced with a problem, which was, let's say there was, I don't know, 2 spoons of bait, we'll call it 75 individual food items or whatever. And my hook bait didn't stand out really. And what we noticed was the fish would come, drop on the spot, have a mouthful and go. And although every time they dropped down and fed and swam away again, there was 1 mouthful of food less, and my hook bait was 1 mouthful closer to being taken. There was a small window of opportunity, it seemed, around about the morning period, as is often the case when you're fishing. And it's something to bear in mind about overbaiting, because if you do overbait, and you can do, if there's too much food out there, even if you've got fish visiting the spot regularly, you can miss that window of opportunity simply because your hook bait wasn't picked up. And that's by chance, you know, unless you use something that really gives the fish a reason to pick it up as we saw in the film, you know, they can just miss it. And that's all they were doing. They weren't ignoring my hook bait. They were just missing it because there's a lot of other food out there. And the problem I had was the camera was there and the bait, the camera was there and there was too much bait there. And then on top of that, my hook bait wasn't drawing the attention it needed to. Now, had the bait I put out that first night been eaten, I think that second day would have been a lot easier to get a bite. But after a while, and it was a while, you know, fish kept coming in, kept eating. We got to the point where they'd eaten a lot of the bait, but the hook bait still hadn't been taken. And for that reason, I decided to try a bright hook bait. Now, I'm sure lots of you will know, I use squid goo and scent from hell, that combination. I use that all the time. It's something when I fish out in the lake. You know, it's very rare, I don't use it these days. It's kind of my go-to, but when I'm fishing in the edge, the bird life can be a problem, and you put a bright pink one in crystal clear water and you know, you'd think that the birds are going to be all over that. But fortunately, it did get to a point where the birds weren't so much of a problem, and because of what we'd seen, I thought I've got to put this out there, I've got to give it a go. And I decided to make the call and put a bright hook bait onto the spot. And what happened after that was really, really interesting. I always, maybe not always, but I regularly fish bright hook baits over large amounts of bait. When you're fishing with a lot of bait, if your hook bait doesn't stand out, you need a feeding situation where the carp are going to come in, feed with confidence, stay on the spot and eat through what you're feeding them. I think the problem we're getting here is because of the camera, the carp are not confident in staying on the spot. So although they've visited the spot lots of times, they're basically doing what I'd call a drive-by. They turn up, drop down, have a mouthful. Very rarely have they had more than one mouthful. Some have, but it's been rare. And then they swim away. When you've got a lot of bait on the spot, which I have had today because of what I put in last night, and your hook bait doesn't stand out, the fish turn up and at random they pick up the bait. I saw this on the underwater I did years ago with Corda, and I know that this happens. So if your hook bait doesn't stand out, you have to have a feeding situation where they're feeding confidently, and that isn't happening here. They're dropping down and then they're moving off. So every time they turn up, let's say I've got 25 food items out there, you've got a 1 in 25 chance of them picking yours up. I am now gonna put Ye Old Faithful out there. Squid goo pop up. I've got so many carp on these. When I'm fishing out in the lake, I use this all of the time. The reason I don't do it in the edge, as I said a minute ago, is bird life. So when I fish in the margins, I'm putting a tight patch of bait with a hook bait that doesn't stand out because I'd want to deter the birds. And the idea is the fish come in, they feed confidently, and I'm not quite getting that situation here, and I believe it's because of the camera. When they get near it, they spook. They're turning up now, they're looking for food. So my plan is put this rig in position and then bait it again. And with a bright hook bait, I can afford to have lots of bait on the spot to draw the fish in, and then the bright hook bait, you know, they come onto the spot because of the food that is there. They see the hook bait, they pick it up. You know, these are things that I'm certain of, but I think the camera is making things hard. So I think put a bit more bait in, put a bright one on the spot, and the fish will see the bait. They'll come in, they want the food, I know they do, I can tell by watching them, but they don't want to hang around. So if they turn up to do one of their little drive-bys, they drop down, hopefully see the pink while it's all over. That's the theory. Will it work? Right, so whilst that's been playing, me and Bridget have been talking, and someone has asked in the comments section, have I done a video on how to, wasn't make the hook baits, but how to prepare those hook baits? Yes, we did do a video in probably March, do you reckon? March, but I didn't put it out because I've been trying to stockpile as much goo as I can, so I didn't want to draw any attention to it. But now that this film's out, we might as well put the other one out. So yes, we have made one. And the question was, how long does it take to prepare them? I would say around about 14 days. And the reason for that is you've got the Scent from Hell hook baits as they come from Baitworks. I then boost them with the Scent from Hell liquid 3 or 4 times every couple of days. So I boost them, 2 days later I do it again, 2 days later I do it again, 2 days later I do it again, and then I do the same with the goo. So it takes 10 days-ish, that sort of time. And obviously sometimes you forget to do it for a day, so it normally takes around about 10 to 14 days to get them to the stage where I'm going to use them. But obviously once you've done them, you know, they're done, and I tend to do them in big batches. But that video will come out at some point, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And the other thing Bridger said is that I should give somebody some hook baits. So with the rig bundle that you can win, or one of our members will win, for any of you that have tuned in a little bit late, we've got 3 prizes up for grabs. There's a bait bundle from Baitworks and Nash. There's a quarter bundle, which is the rig bits and pieces that I use. And then we've got 48 hours fishing at Ashbury Fishery. So 3 really cool prizes. And if you would like to win them, you have to be a Cypography member. And you have to put something in the comments section about what it was you liked about the underwater films or didn't like. You don't have to say you liked them, you can say you hated them, but you do have to be a Cypography member, and you do have to comment in the comments section to win. And if you're watching this live, you can comment now. If you're a member and you're watching this in 2 or 3 days time, you can do it then, and we will draw the winners in around about a week or so's time. So hook baits, that was that done, wasn't it? So we made the change, and what happened once that rig went out was really, really interesting. And years ago I'd made an underwater film with Corda, and we saw that then when you put the goo in the water, the fish went crazy for it. And that's what happened on this trip as well. Part of me expected it to happen, part of me was telling myself it wouldn't happen. You know, I use these a lot, and I use them a lot for a reason. It's because I have a hell of a lot of faith in them, and that is through fishing with them for a hell of a lot for a number of years. And it all stemmed from things I saw a long time ago. And one of the first things that really, you know, really made me start using the goo was the first time I saw them react to it on the Corda underwater. There's a few other instances and some things that happened in my own fishing that made me, you know, really believe it. But seeing it again, all these years later, once again on an underwater camera, really, you know, it sealed the deal. And the fish, not just the carp, they were magnetised to the hook bait, would be probably an understatement. They were quite obsessed with it, and they were coming onto the spot. And the problem I had before with fish coming down, having one mouthful and then moving away without paying any attention to the hook bait because it didn't stand out, that soon wasn't an issue. And actually they were coming down onto the spot, and at times they weren't even batting an eyelid at the bait that was on the spot. It was all about that hook bait. And when you see that happen, you know, you realise just how important it is to have a hook bait that they want to eat. And that may not always be the goo. I'm not saying it's the be all and end all by any means, you know. If I could have put a bright yellow one out there, the same thing may have happened. I don't know. Do I believe it would have? No, I don't, if I'm honest. But, you know, personal preference is all a matter of opinion. And the more underwater films we do, the more we will learn, you know, what affects carp behaviour, what works well, what doesn't, and, you know, what can change the game. But for us, or me, in that situation, that hook bait did change the game. And I think the next clip is the tench. Is it the tench? The tench clip? Is that the next one? Yeah, so watch this clip of these tench. Now, the tench were visiting the spot the whole way through the film, or the whole way through the session. And I was getting picked up quite regularly by them, and I wasn't hooking them. So if you catch loads of tench, maybe try my rig, because if you've seen the films, or if you at some point watch the films, you will see just how many times the tench picked me up. If you're a tench angler, don't use my rig. But if you're a carp angler and you don't want to catch tench, maybe you should, because the tench, for whatever reason, they were picking it up, spitting it out constantly. The carp didn't do that. I think I got picked up a couple of times, but you know, in the carp fishing sense, it performed really well. And in the tench fishing sense, it performed really bad. But in the tench fishing sense, as a carp angler, it did exactly what I wanted it to do, and that was not hook the tench left, right, and Chelsea. But the hook bait for both tench and carp, you know, the attention that it drew was incredible. And have a look at this little clip, or these clips.
No, go away, please don't, please don't. That's it, go.
Oh no.
Look, he's upside down, he's doing backflips.
He's eyeing it up.
Tench, away. They want that so bad. They're just
smelling it,
like
getting
this.
the aroma off it. Oh, I just want it. Oh no, it's bad.
Oh, he's gonna have it.
Yeah, 100%.
Leave it alone.
He's behind it, isn't he? I think he's quite a bit behind it.
Ooh.
Yeah, he was quite a bit behind that.
It makes you think the rig's not as close to the
Oh, look, they're just obsessed. Please, just go away. What are they doing? Look, he's spinning round. No. No, go away. He's literally snatching at it. He's going like that with his head.
What was he doing?
He's trying to eat it.
No, but what was he? He's done say afterwards.
No, he was
He's sort of-
shaking his head trying to grab it. Bolted. Oh, what? Look, blank. Oh, mega. It's so cool.
The goose making him
Look,
flank.
mate, I'm telling you, this is the sort of thing we see them do before. They just fish start going crazy when it's in the water. Remember I said to you before about the roach going all weird and that?
Them nutty.
Yeah. Right, so there we go. Tench doing weird things. Now that is what happened. But that didn't happen before the bait went in. There was something about it that they really wanted, and it only did it just send them a little bit crazy. You saw the flanking and that. There's other clips in the films you'll see the fish almost attacking the hook bait. Whatever it was, it drove them mad. I never actually caught a tench, did I? Which was weird. All that time, didn't catch a tench. Someone asked a second ago in the comments, how long do we fish? How long did I fish to make those films? So it was from, I think, 12 o'clock on the Monday through till 12 o'clock on the Wednesday. So it was 3 days. We started fishing, like I say, 12 o'clock on Monday, and then we'd reel in at night. First thing the next morning, put the rod back out. So it was probably...
Might have even been Thursday.
No, it wasn't. It's 3 days. Yeah, 3 days. Yeah. So not that long. 3 days, days only. We didn't do the nights. We could have done the nights. We were allowed to, but we wanted to make an underwater film, so there's no point catching them at night. But yeah, 3 days fishing. The first day was undoubtedly the dullest day of the lot. But like I said earlier, the wind turned and it sort of killed things. But they're the really interesting things that you see with an underwater camera. I think one of the main things is how much attention or how many fish visit the spot that you would never know about. So you sit on your bed chair or whatever and you think, oh, nothing's happening, and actually there's loads going on down there. But the other, so you can miss a lot and not know about it. But also when the fish aren't there and you're not seeing them and you're staring at that screen for all that time, it really highlights, how long they haven't been there for. When you're just staring at that screen and nothing's coming in, it makes you realise just how many opportunities you could be missing elsewhere around the lake. But anyway, yeah, the hook bait thing, looking back now, probably the most important aspect of the whole film. It was in my opinion, it was what really changed the game. And yeah, I think the footage we got will highlight that perfectly. So if that sort of thing interests you, be sure to watch them, because it is interesting. It really is. Big leads was something I wanted to talk about. Now, I fish big leads all the time when I fish in the edges. Not so much out in the lake. I think the problem you have with a big lead when you're fishing out in the lake is that you have to cast it, and the casting scares carp. So I've always tried to sort of edge on the side of as big a lead as I need to use. Whereas in the edge, 99.9% of the time, I'll use my baiting pole to drop the rig into place. And the baiting pole you will see in the film, I made that many, many years ago. And it is essentially what you guys will now know as a bushwhacker pole. So I made it out of drain pipe and couplings. So I just glued them all together, filled it with expanding foam, taped it all up, and basically it gave me a never-ending baiting pole, because back in the day when I made that, you had the Angling Intelligent ones, which were about 15 metres long, something like that. But by making it out the pipes, it enabled me to fish with at real long ranges, like people do with a bushwhacker now. The downside to my pole is it's very bendy, and I've actually just started using the Nash one, which is great. But if you haven't used a baiting pole before, I would advise that you do, especially for the margin fishing. I've not gone down the road of, you know, Ollie Davis style, using it at 50 metres out in the lake. Even though I originally made my pole for that, most of the time I use it in short sections. A lot of the time I actually wade and only use 2 or 3 lengths of it. But the original idea was, you know, to have a pole that gets me from A to B at long distance. And in this film, it was probably only, I don't know, 20 odd yards, but the spot suited it perfectly. And you know, you can drop discreetly, you can drop a big lead discreetly onto a spot, bait up, and all that kind of thing with no disturbance. And in a little bay like this that we were fishing in, the less disturbance, the better. And really, in any situation, the less disturbance, the better. So if you haven't tried a baiting pole, then I advise that you do. And if you're fishing in the edge, or you're going to, then I think the big leads thing is really good. You know, the bigger lead you can have on, the better, really, for hooking purposes, but not for disturbance purposes. So you've got to weigh it up. But for me, margin fishing, when it's at close quarters and I'm using the pole, I want to use as big a lead as possible. And our rig bundle will include one of those leads, maybe even 3. So have a little look at the lead setup. This is how I set up my inline drop-off, something I've used for a number of years, and if you're going to use a big lead, I do prefer to drop that lead. So this is how I do it. A neat little trick I come up with years and years ago, and it works really well for that drop-off inline style of fishing. Right, so I'm going to change this lead into a lead that has a soft section at the bottom to plug my swivel into. So it's a pretty simple process. Pop the stem out, trim the stem, and then push that back inside the lead. Pair of scissors, just make sure it's in properly, which it is. Now I'm going to add this rubber stem inside. Trim it. Not all the way, you need to pull it back out. And then we'll plug that into the base of the lead. So I've recreated the stem, but I've got the soft rubber section there. Push the swivel into the lead. And wrap the lead core around, or lead around, it's not lead core. Tail rubber on, and there we go. Rubber at the bottom, hard at the top, leader wrap around the lead, good to go. Right, I'm going to get the rod straight back out. There are still fish there, so let's make the most of this. Forgot to bounce my back leg down, didn't I? Ready? I'm going to drop it. Right, so at that point, right, so that rig's just gone out. I just caught, at this stage, I just caught a common of £37. That was the first carp that we caught. The rig that has just been positioned there is the rig, and that's the actual drop that ended up catching the biggest carp in the lake. And I didn't want to show the footage and stuff like that. I don't want to spoil it for those that haven't seen it. But, you know, at that stage there, I'm fishing with a wafter, my favourite rig, my favourite lead. You know, I've got my best of everything out there. And thank God I did, because, as I just said, you know, the carp that then turned up, I don't think we'd seen it at this stage, maybe once without realising, but as the day progresses, you know, a very, very big carp and others turn up, and then, yeah, just some incredible stuff happens. So if you haven't watched the films, make sure you do, because I'm sure you will enjoy them. They've been by far our best received films we've ever done. Never really had feedback like it, and, you know, hopefully a sign of lots more to come, because we plan to do these regularly. But, you know, it's really important that you guys watch them. You know, we want many of you to watch them as possible, and I'm sure you'll love this one. So for those of you that weren't watching at the start, I'll just show you once more the trailer. This is a double trailer, so there's two parts to this underwater film, part 1 and part 2, and this is the sort of all-encompassing trailer with some incredible bits from both.
I don't really know what to say, to be quite honest. I've told you how happy I am already. I've told you how blown away I am. I've told you how crazy it's been, watching all the footage, watching everything unfold, making the little changes. This is carp fishing like I've never known it before. Oh my God, I've got him. Oh.
Yeah! Just under 45. Just under 45.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It looked big out in the middle, and I just seen it, and I don't think it looked as big. I don't know. My head is blown. Back, it's coming back, it's coming back, it's coming back. Oh, look, I just want it. Mate, put the goo in, mate. This is what they've done on the underwater, mate. I put it in the water, and they just want it. That is the first carp that's come onto the spot, and he's 3 times in a row he's gone up to the hook, mate. 3 times in a row. Watching him sat on that spot, I've never seen a carp do anything like that. He just sat there, hugging the bottom. Mental stuff.
Like, does it get any more scary than this? Look at him just eating.
This is a massive comment. Guarding the spot of his life. If your hook bait doesn't stand out, you have to have a feeding situation where they're feeding confidently, and that isn't happening here. They're dropping down and then they're moving off. So I am now going to put Ye Old Faithful out there. Squid goo pop up. Got so many carp on these. Yes, he's very good. Literally there. Oh, inches.
The one behind it.
Yeah. Seen him out there on the top. I'm glad I ain't got my Polaroids on. I actually hate watching him out there. I can see him though, out in the lake. And this capture will live on as by far one of my favourites. By far one of the most memorable, and something that I'm going to be smiling about for a very, very long time. Thank you so much. See you later, old friend.
Okay, so there you go. That is the 2 films in a nutshell. But whilst we're making them, because of what happened, basically, we got to a stage and we're like, well, we end the films there because it can't get any better than that. But we still had a night to go. I quite fancied having a bit of a celebration, some wine, a few beers. And with that in mind, we decided to make a bit of a behind-the-scenes film. So that will go live on YouTube tomorrow at 5:30. And when I say tomorrow, today is the 26th of July, which is a Tuesday. So depending on when you watch this, it may already be live. But if you're watching it today on Tuesday, Wednesday 5:30, the 27th of July, we've got the making of, we'll call it the making of the underwater, and it shows you how we did it. Basically, it's kind of it was a off the cuff idea, a way of using up the time we've got, but I think it's quite an interesting film, and it really does show, you know, exactly what happened throughout the shoot, how we did everything, and I'm sure you'll like it. So be sure to check that out as well. Like I say, 5:30 tomorrow on YouTube. Don't miss it. Now, throughout the live stream, we've had questions coming in. Bridge has chosen some of them. How many have we got?
Just come through as well.
Oh, we've got another one. Go on, I'll do that one now.
When doing edge fishing, this is from Liam Carter.
Liam Carter.
When
Okay.
doing edge fishing, is water clarity a must? Obviously, it helps a great deal being able to see your spot. But have you had the same results in murkier water?
Yeah, so when you're doing edge fishing for an underwater film, yeah, important. But otherwise, no, not really. I mean, it helps, don't get me wrong. I think clear water always helps. Maybe not so much in terms of carp seeing your lines and that kind of thing, but my favourite water clarity really is gin clear water, just because I like looking at the fish. But the best for fishing is that kind of, that in between, where you do have enough clarity to see the bottom, or at least see down and see the fish, etc., etc. But at the same time, you know, it's not uber clear and they can see everything when feeding cautiously and that kind of stuff. So would I say it really affects your fishing? Not really. I think it doesn't really matter too much. Carp have got very good eyesight even in murky water. So no, I would say I'm not worried whether it's clear or murky, but it does make things that bit easier and more enjoyable as well, because a big thing for edge fishing for me is being able to see them. I like that side of it. That's the fun. That's, you know, that's what makes it so much more fun than fishing out in the lake. You know, when you fish out in the lake, you don't know what's going on. When you fish in the edge, you do. You get to see it all happening and unfold. So I think it's not the be all and end all, but the clarity is nice to have on your side. But if I could pick, I would choose that in between. So Paul Compton, I wonder how many times we get done by a tench in a session. Well, if I had to guess based on what we saw then, I would say a lot. But it does depend on your rigs. I'm sure it depends on your rigs. You know, it really will. But yeah, and from what we saw in that film, it was a hell of a lot. A surprisingly large amount. But I think also different times of year, it could be different. Tench do really seem to hang themselves during certain periods of the year. Ivan Shop, is that Shop On or Shop Off? Shop Off? Right, Bridget, we don't know. Ivan Shopov says, do you think adding maize would produce more fish? I think no. I think that the problem we maybe, like I said earlier, so the problem that we had in terms of getting a pickup was the fact that the fish weren't feeding confidently on the spot. And the reason they weren't feeding confidently on the spot was, in my mind, no doubt, because of the camera. If that camera wasn't there, I think fish would have turned up and they would have sat and fed on that spot for longer periods of time. And it was really difficult to get them to do that. But I'm almost certain it was because of the camera. It hadn't been in there quite long enough to build their confidence to the stage where they were going to sit and feed in front of it for too long. So, do I think adding maize would have produced more fish? Probably not, no. But if you say you put a stack of 3 or 4 grains of maize out there, which actually becomes quite a bright and obvious hook bait, maybe that would have, you know, got more attention because the fish see that hook bait more easily when visiting the spot. And that is what we needed to achieve and eventually did. When they come in for their one mouthful, you know, it's your hook bait that they want to pick up. But I think if you'd put handfuls of maize on the spot, no, I don't think it would have caught you more fish. Tom Claris, can we try the new versus old squid goo on the next film? Maybe we could. Liam Carter, when you balanced your hook bait, was it normal crimps or crimps plugged with putty? So yeah, you may have seen when balancing my hook baits, I plugged them with the little quarter crimps, and they were not plugged, oh hang on, but with normal crimps or crimps plugged with putty. So no, it was with normal crimps, no putty inside them, and that's always enough. I use it for my pop-ups. The reason I do that, if you're wondering, rather than use a bigger shot, is I don't like to use massive shot. I think they're ugly and kind of unbalanced, so I use a number 1 or a number 4 shot. If I'm using a pop-up, I use a number, what's bigger, 1 or 4? 1's bigger, isn't it? I think 1's bigger. When I'm using a pop-up, I use the bigger one. When I'm using a wafter, I use the smaller one. And then depending on how much weight I still need to sort of counterbalance, I pop a couple of crimps into the bottom of the bait. But they are not plugged with putty. Paul Compton again. You like him, don't you?
It's your favourite.
Bridger likes you, Paul. Anything you wished you tried that you will next time? No, there isn't actually. There is nothing I wish I'd tried. I didn't really change a lot, obviously, other than the hook bait. But no, nothing I wish I'd tried. Luke Carter, what venues are you looking at for the future? So we're always, well, I say we're always, since this, you know, and in the future, we're going to obviously be constantly thinking about this. I did have a shoot planned next week, which was going to be really, really interesting. Bridge has ruined that because it's his best friend's stag wedding, and now he says he can't come. So I might still do it. I'm not sure, but we will do them both home and abroad, so it won't just be in England. We will do them at low stock lakes, high stock lakes. You know, to cut a long story short, there isn't so much a venue that we're looking at. You know, we're very much open to anywhere, as long as it fits the criteria, as long as it fits the bill, and we can make it happen there. You know, that's the hard bit. It's easy. I think it's easy to think somewhere will work and then it won't. But yeah, somewhere clear with nice carp. You know, that's about all we're looking for, really. And a lot of the time, you know, it's going to depend on the anglers we do these films with, because although I will certainly do more myself, we will do them with other anglers as well. You know, that's a big part of Cypography, is having other anglers on, and these underwater films will be no different. So we will take different anglers to different lakes, and I'm sure that will see us go here, there and everywhere. And we've actually just done one with Steve Renyard on the Bluebell Complex, and I have some footage to show you in a little while. But yes, let's have a look here. Dan Goldbraith? Not sure on exactly his name. Dan Goldbraith. Bridge has done his best handwriting here. Goldbraith, yeah?
It is my best handwriting.
Yeah, I know it is, yeah. Do you think you would have caught one quick up with particle bait? No, as I've kind of already said a minute ago in answer to one of the other questions, the problem we had was the camera made the fish cautious. They didn't want to sit and feed on the spot, and I don't think it would have mattered how much bait we put in or what bait we put in. The problem was they needed to, if one carp had come onto that spot and sat there for 10 minutes eating food, we'd have caught lots more. You know, if that was happening, fish were turning up and feeding confidently, we'd have caught more carp, no doubt about that. But the camera put them on edge, and they weren't willing to hang around, so they would drop down onto the spot, have one mouthful and go. So no, I don't think it would have mattered what bait. The important thing was having a hook bait that meant that when they did arrive, that's what they went for. Andy Cask, do you know why fish flank? So I think they'll do it for a number of reasons. You got removing parasites. That's a very popular one. So in the spring and stuff, they're going to be leached up. They'll have, you know, the irritants basically, and they will want to rid themselves of that. So they'll use. You'll quite often see in a lake, for example, if there's a branch fallen on the bottom, or there's a big brick or rock in the water, or an old tyre, or it can be anything really. Often it's a branch. That's a very popular one because, you know, in terms of things falling into the lake, what are the likelihood of something that isn't a branch going in? Not that high. But quite often you'll find these little cratered out spots next to something like a branch. And if you ever see fish from a tree or watch them and stuff, I've seen it lots of times, they'll flank along the bottom and over the branch, and in the process they slightly crater the bottom out. And I mentioned a second ago that we were filming with Steve Renyard the other week, and when I put the camera in first, I found this spot with a boat. I put the camera in, and there were these 4 bricks on the bottom, and I thought, oh, perfect, I can put my camera right next to them. It will blend in with the fact they're bricks, maybe not look so obscure. I've lowered it down onto the bottom. I didn't realise this at the time. Bridge was watching the camera from the bank. I've lowered it down next to these bricks, and he said half the screen was just gravel, and basically what had happened in front of these bricks was a crater which I couldn't quite clock from the boat. It was only maybe a 7 or 8 inch depression, but the fish were using those bricks to rub on, and in turn, over time, as they're rubbing on them, they're also rubbing on the bottom in front of them, and they create these craters. So, but the flanking that you may be referencing in the film there was probably the tench, and I think sometimes I don't believe that was a parasite thing. I think that's like almost an excitement thing. But I also know for certain that carp will flank through bait and looking for lines. I've fished a lake around about 4 or 5 years ago, and they did it on there all the time. And I used to watch them. Doing it out in the lake. You'd see people quite often, if people put bait out, you'd see these huge patches of fizz coming up over their bait. A lot of people think they're getting fed on. They weren't. You know, when those patches appear, you know, big sheet up just hits the top. That's a carp flanking, and they were putting bait out. The carp were turning up. They were flanking the areas, feeling for the lines. You see the people getting the liners. Quite often in the margins, I saw fish doing it. You could put food in, no lines, just put food in. They would come in, they would flank through the bait a few times, and then once they'd done that, then they would eat it. People that fished down the margins would quite often get their rigs pulled off their spots and things like that. I actually caught a carp once, a really rare carp. I was fishing over boilies out in the middle of the lake with chod rigs, and I was fishing amongst the boilies, so I'd baited over the top of the rigs, and one evening I had a bite, and I'd hooked this carp in the top lobe of his tail on a little pop up like this. The only way that's getting there is obviously if he's on his side. And then after that, on that particular, I used to fish short of my bait, so I would always, to avoid that flanking, whether I fished in the margins or when I was fishing out in the lake, I'd put my bait at say 12 rod lengths, and I'd fish my rigs at anything from 11 to 11 and a half. So you're always sort of 6 foot to a rod length away. And that was because these fish would come in, flank for the lines. If they found the lines, they wouldn't feed confidently at all. If they did feed, and then if they didn't find the lines, they would. So a variety of different reasons why a carp will flank, you know, but you know, it just depends. Oh, that was the last question. I'm sure there's loads more. We did this last time. We had loads of comments, loads of questions, and because we can't answer them all at this point in time, we'll do another video at some point and go back through the best ones and ask those. So last thing I think I had to talk about, so I've mentioned tomorrow's film, 5:30 tomorrow. Make sure you check that out. Yesterday we released Mark Bryant's For the Record interview, 2 hours, 20 minutes long, I think it was. Really good interview this. I always say they're one of my favourites, maybe I should stop saying that, but it's a really good interview, very interesting, loads of different stuff talked about, as is often the case with those interviews. Mark is the bait man, he's the man behind Baitworks, so you know, that's the bait company I use. He really does know his stuff, not just about bait, but fishing in general. So check that out. And last thing, before we go, this is, should we call it a teaser? I put this together in about, I think at 12:24, when we were going live at 12:30, I put this little clip together, so don't judge me on the editing skills, but it was as best as I could do as quickly as I could, because we thought, do you know what we should do? We should show them a little bit of the footage from Steve Renyard. So this is a little insight into what will be our next underwater filming project, which is being edited right now. Steve Renyard at Bluebell Lakes. I hope you've enjoyed the live stream. As I said earlier, we have 3 prizes up for grabs. Quarter bundle, Baitworks/Nash bundle, that's the bait bundle, and then 48 hours fishing at Ashbury Fisheries. And if you would like the chance to win one of those bundles, please, in the comments section, either during this live or at a later date. Huh?
Just ask us questions.
Yeah, I know what to say, Bridger. Sorry, Bridget's just telling me what to say, even though I've said it 4 times already. Ask us a question or tell us what you liked about the underwater film. And yeah, that's that. Sorry, you put me off there. So yeah, if you
didn't say about the questions, you just tell us what you think of the film.
If you tell us what you thought about the film, or ask us a question in the comment section. But you have to be a Cypography member. 3 prizes up for grabs. That's it. Should we play the Renyard clip?
See you guys.